Hey everybody, it's Lee. Just before we jump into this episode of Win Championship Trades for Life, we just want to let you know that throughout this episode, you may hear some minor issues with the audio quality. You have our word. The information you receive will be well worth the time. With that said, just want to give you a heads up. Enjoy this episode of Win. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Win Championship Trades for Life, a show focused on strengthening the mental fitness of athletes, coaches, and anyone and everyone that works on a team at any level. I'm Lee Elias, that's JB Spizzo, and we are joined today by Lieutenant Colonel retired Dave Duffy. Dave is a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point, where he played rugby and earned a Bachelor of Science degree in engineering management. He served for 21 years in the U.S. Army as part of the U.S. Army Special Forces as an Officer and Green Beret, and had multiple tours in Africa, Southwest Asia, and combat experience in Afghanistan. In addition to his accomplished military career, Dave is also a business development consultant and entrepreneur who owns several Tropical Smoothie Cafe franchises. I love that place, which he operates with his wife, who is also the CEO of each location. He is described by JB as a leader, warrior, and a winner. And we're privileged to have him on Win with us today. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to it.
No, we are too, man. And again, we talked about this before the show. The little email interactions before the show tells me this is going to be an awesome episode of Win. First
no
question
pressure there at all.
no, there's never any pressure on this show, but we have to win. That's the name of the show. No, I'm just kidding. So first question for you, Dave, is we know you played rugby at some of the most competitive levels, college at West Point, Army selects team. What was your route to the sport? It's an amazing sport, by the way. It's one that's completely underappreciated in this country for some reason, unbeknownst to me. And how did it shape you as a person?
Wow, I could go on for hours for that. I did not know anything about rugby. I played high school football. We were state champions. I was an all-state player out of Virginia. I made the West Point football team, and I was immediately undersized and failing in academics. So I scraped through with a D in English comp at the end of the first semester. And I can honestly say I quit the team, but no one tried to keep me there when I said that I couldn't play anymore. So my table commandant was H.R. McMaster, who was the hero of 73 Easting, and also recently on the National Security Council for Trump, and he's been in the news frequently. HR was my table commandant during Beast Barracks, which was the first summer there. And he in making conversation, he said that if football didn't work out, to call him and his company E2 to play rugby. So when I got back from Christmas leave, that would have been in January of '84. Good Lord, I'm old. I called him and he told me to come out. They were doing conditioning runs. And so I met him all at the clock tower there. We ran up the ski slope. We ran all the gates. We went to the gym. We had every step in the gym. It wore me out, and yet it was a great, welcoming environment. Football was really a haze. You know, it was just an extension of the barracks. You know, you're a low-level player. You got to work your way up, which I get all that. Rugby was a community, an immediate affinity with everybody there. I got recognized by everyone, and my first practice, I got thrown into a scrimmage, and I was told that if my team has the ball, to get out of the way, and if they don't have the ball, tackle the guy with the ball. And that led to 31 years of playing rugby. I played my last rugby match 5 years ago.
Wow.
And I'm 56 now. And rugby, it's caused me a few headaches in life, to be sure, with some poor decisions. But rugby probably was the best sports thing that ever happened to me. It made me part of a community where there's an instant connection, because it is a small community. And even though it's the fastest growing women's sport at the collegiate level and has been for years, it's still a niche sport. They tried to go to 7-a-side rugby because it plays better for TV. There's more scoring. It's easier to understand, but it's not American football. It's not baseball, not basketball. I mean, heck, even hockey has a hard time breaking the market, and hockey's a great sport to watch. But rugby is a culture that, frankly, doing business development since I retired, I've created more deals through a rugby network and more business opportunities through rugby than other networks like the service academies or special operations military, because there's an instant recognition that you're a rugby player, that you are you're not doing it for pay, you're not doing it for glory. I think the most I ever had at a match was 1,000 people, and that's when we played Air Force my senior year, and all the, a bunch of the Corps cadets came out to watch that game. But otherwise, it's normally 10 people, of which most of them are wives or girlfriends, and a few dogs running around, and that's it. So you're out there playing for the love of the sport. You're playing for your teammates. It's a rough game, which I loved, but yet at the end of the game, you immediately have a social and drink a few beers with the guy that you were trying to bash his head in just a half hour earlier. And I think that you leave it on the field. I've only had one instance in 31 years where something was taken off the field. And that just makes it a game. You don't have to be big. You just have to be tough. And I think that it rewards that versus, if you're a high school football player, you can have all the talent in the world, but a college program can make a big kid a better football player, but they can't make a better football player a bigger kid. And rugby allows for that. And I think that's really the beauty of that sport.
Wow, amazing. Colonel, glad to see you again. And
always a pleasure, JP.
And hey, Lee, I just want to tell you that I probably got in trouble about 23 times while I was serving at West Point, and the Colonel went to bat for me all 23 times. So that's something there. Colonel, I love what you said about that being a community. And what I really love is, and I sort of knew your story but didn't know the whole thing, is that for you there was life after football. Football wasn't working out. Obviously, you were a wonderful and talented high school player, but now you're in college. It's a little bit different, but you still found a route for success. And I love what you said about team versus community. So in 31 years of playing rugby, what was the best team you were ever on?
Selfishly, I'll say whatever team I was playing on was the best team, because they allowed me on the team, and I played for West Point for 4 years, and I was just on the phone with a classmate that I played with just yesterday, and then I my first duty assignment, I played for the Tacoma Nomads, and I still keep that is one of the really the only best thing about social media, is it allows you to keep up with people that otherwise in the older days you just never would. And so I still keep up with Tacoma Nomads, and when I travel to the Pacific Northwest for work, I still link up with those guys. And it's like no time had passed. I played all Army rugby for 10 years, and we now have an old boys team called Band of Brothers that gets together about once or twice a year to play again. I played for Fort Bragg for years and years, and then even when I retired here to Columbia, South Carolina, I played for the old gray team for about the first 3 or 4 years I was here. And there's a mixer tomorrow night to meet the new coach of the University of South Carolina rugby team. And I'll go to that, even though I played against the Gamecocks. I never played for them, but because of that community, I'm invited to it. And so, I played, and JB, I played in the Dubai Sevens with the team out of Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. I played for the Jinja Gators out of Uganda in the Uganda Cup. And me and a big Canadian were the only blondes on the team, the only Mzungus there, which was basically the only white guys on the team. And that was a great experience. I toured Ireland at 24 for 10 days, playing with a team out of Germany that I'd never been to where their team was, but I got invited to it. I played in the Bahamas a bunch of times. I mean, I've literally been to all over the world playing rugby, and rugby teams are rugby teams. Nothing's lost in culture or translation. I was fortunate enough to play in England, and I played a match in Scotland, and it's just some of the best experiences I've ever had. In some of the most miserable conditions, they're playing against some of the toughest people. I tell you, JB, we played against when I was playing for Bragg in 2001, before 9/11. we played against the British SAS regimental team, and they kicked the snot out of us. I know we got a high school audience, so I won't use the what they really kicked out of us, but they beat the crap out of us. And then afterwards, we had some beers, and they went on their way. Well, 6 months later, I was in Afghanistan doing operations with them. In January, we're in Koust, Afghanistan in February of 2002, and even though we're all bearded up, I'm recognized as some of these big that I just played rugby with some, not 6 months, maybe 7 months earlier. And they sent me one of the rugby jerseys when the tours were over that I have hanging in my closet. So I mean, there was a direct correlation from the rugby field to the combat environment, and again an immediate affinity because of shared. A lot of times you bond over shared misery. You really don't bond over good time. I mean, you do, of course, but misery is what brings people truly together. And in the military units, it's giant ruck marches or cold, wet, miserable, all-night ambushes. I mean, that's why we go after people want to be in the toughest platoon so they can brag to their friends that they're in the toughest platoon. And you do that by creating shared miserable experiences. Well, rugby's a miserable sport, man. It is hard. But afterwards, you talk about some of these tough games for years. I remember Bragg Rugby traveled down to Fort Benning for the military club championships, back in the 90s. And 15 of us went, but there's only 15 on a team. We had no substitutes. And we played 6 games that day. In like 98-degree weather, we were all cramping up. We were all dehydrated. And yet we managed to finish the day. And I can name you most everybody of those 15 that went with us that day, because it was like, hey, we're gonna finish this. Now we didn't win the tournament, and by the end of the day, we weren't much of a team, but we gave as good as we could give, and then we drank heartily afterwards. But yeah. So that's a long answer. Lots of great experiences. Got me in trouble in the military sometimes because I didn't necessarily have my priorities straight as a young guy. But I had a few platoon sergeants, later on yanked me back in line, and then when I went special forces, I was a little bit older, and I played rugby when I could, versus every chance that when I was able to, versus regarding everything. And it used to be if I missed a practice, I'd be bummed out. As you get older and hopefully a little wiser, you realize that rugby is a game, but it's not your profession, and nor your career. And if you're going to be a professional, then you got to get your priorities right. I didn't necessarily have that as a young lieutenant, but eventually I got there.
Yeah, Dave, I'll tell you, you talked about the misery creating the bond. And, the truth is this for our audience too. Look, winning championships or winning anything is awesome. But in order to create the bond to win, it's specifically speaking in sports right now, you have to go through some shared misery to get there. No one just shows up, or it's extremely rare a team will just show up and be awesome and win, right? You have to go through the tough times. You got to go through the adversity. You got to lose typically to learn to win. And sometimes this takes place over one season. Sometimes it takes place over a decade, that shared experience. But
I'll tell you, Lee, even if let's say you're a very incredibly talented team, at whatever level, but if you don't put in the work, and the misery might not necessarily be losing, the misery is two-a-days. The misery is voluntary workouts at the professional level. The misery is the extra time in the film room, or in high school, it's the summer weightlifting program. It's the work required. And if you're doing that by yourself, then the team's not developing. But if you're doing that as a team, you could go undefeated and then love it, and all you think about is hosting that trophy. But it was the work, which work is work. It's miserable. That's why they call it work. That leads you to be able to have that team dynamic. That when you are down, when you're losing or the game's on the line, and someone has to come up with a play, that someone comes up with a play because of all the work. Everything that was put into it, it's there's a West Point quote, and I don't remember it, but it's like, you sweat and practice, so upon the fields of friendly strife are sown the seeds of victory, that on other fields and other days will lead to victory. And that is a mangled quote. I was the worst plebe. I never memorized anything. But really, you sweat and practice, you sweat in training so you don't bleed in combat. And all those trite statements are 100% on the mark.
Totally. Yeah. I think the sports version of that is we practice harder than the games. So the games are easy. And I'll tell you, it's funny. You reminded me of this quick story, and I'll transition to the next question. When I was a university hockey player, I played ice hockey in college. My freshman year, we won a championship my freshman year. And I always come back, people say, how'd you win? And it wasn't the talent. It was because we had a Marine come out once a week, run us through drill. And I'll never forget the day. It was early winter, freezing outside. And he had us crawl across a football field covered in goose crap. And it was covered, right? And I remember it was miserable. It was horrible. We all took pictures afterwards. We knew what we had just been to. And like you just said, when we got to that championship time period, man, these other teams didn't crawl through goose crap. They didn't go through what we went through with this guy. They didn't experience any of this stuff. And, that is what one of the major pieces that brought us to victory. Now, with that said, on this show, we make comparisons to the military and athletics all the time. Comes to attitude, teamwork, competition level. We even use a lot of the same words, although the definition of those words, like sacrifice, can be very different when you're talking hockey to the military. But can you give us your thoughts on how the military and athletics really come together? Because we have a lot of military guests on this show, and it's because the congruencies are there, right? When you look at the team of the military and the team on the field or the ice or anywhere else, they're teams, right? Tell us how the military has helped you out with that.
Well, it goes to the word teamwork. And I've been on teams my entire life, whether athletic or military or work teams. And then, I was in the infantry first. I had 3 different platoons. I didn't want to do anything else other than be a platoon leader. And then I went special forces, and I was an A-team leader, which is down at the bottom level. And then I was a B-team leader, which is the company level in Afghanistan. But what you learn in sports is that if you're playing team sports, is that you're only as good as the people around you. And if you're not working to develop them and work with them and figure out how you can both, how you can get the best out of each other, then you're going to fail, or you won't be as good, I guess. You won't realize that potential. Well, in athletics, that generally goes to wins and losses, and, coaches lose their jobs and people move on in life. But in the military, people die. Now, don't get me wrong. You can do everything correct in the military, 100%. People are still going to die because it's a dangerous business. I mean, when people are trying to kill you every day, sometimes they do. But particularly, SF, and it's the same with the infantry. And really, it's the same with you're there. I never wanted to let anybody down. I never wanted to let my team down. And it was heightened by the fact that I was the commander or the team leader, but that was everybody on the team. You don't want to let anybody down. To me, that would be the most horrific thing that could ever happen, is that you fail to pull your weight, or you fail to do what we trained, whether because of physical or mental. I saw plenty of guys that were rock stars that couldn't get outside the wire, or after a while couldn't go back outside the wire. And, you don't condemn them, you just replace them. And that's the biggest thing, is it from the teamwork. I played offensive line. You had to do, you have 5 individuals that if they don't do their job, everything fails. So 5 individuals having to work together. Well, same in rugby. I played in the pack. So there's 8 of you that have to produce the ball for the backs. If you're not doing your job, then it fails. And that directly translates to the military. If you're not doing your specific part in battle drills, if you're not calling in for fire as you're supposed to, if you're not doing your immediate reaction drills as you've trained over and over again, you put people's lives in jeopardy.
Right.
And let me tell you something, that's noticed immediately. and you don't want to ever be that guy. And that's one of the things that's I've never really thought much about it, to be honest with you, but sports drilled that into my head, and so it wasn't anything to even think about going into the military, right. Just because you just knew that. I mean, if you're willing to die for somebody, then their opinion of you is the most important thing ever, and you never want to jeopardize that. I'd rather, I mean, you'd rather die than have that. At least that's for me. I'm sure JB may echo the same thing, but that's just how I feel.
Oh, and I think, Colonel, that a lot of it is, we always talk about in team sports, team chemistry and how that team chemistry is developed. And I know from the military and even in sports, that team chemistry is developed at the lowest level. Of course, it's the commander's responsibility to ensure it's healthy. Right. Everybody's of good character. The old Ranger saying, the organization will not be comprised of brigands or hooligans. And if it is to be disbanded. But I think inside that team chemistry, that's where that's where the batter's made. Colonel, so part of it is, when you were selecting, Green Berets, and again, you had the best of the best. You probably had the pick of the litter. You had men and women that were physically fit, competent, smart, can do it all. A lot of former athletes. But you were very selective when you chose them, because there were some attributes and qualities that you were looking for. Can you just talk to our audience about that?
It really goes back to Wild Bill Donovan in the OSS during World War II. And Wild Bill Donovan said that he wanted a PhD that could win a bar fight. And that is very much the same for Green Berets, because you have to be able to work as a team member, but you also have to be able to work as an individual. There are times where it's just, a couple, like in Afghanistan, it'd be like two Green Berets and 100 Afghans, or, you're literally out there on your own. So you have to be able to operate in a gray area. And that is the biggest attribute that Green Berets need. I love Marines and I love Rangers, and I've done all kind of work with both of them, but you're not looking for a gray area Marine. You want a black and white. You're told to do this, hua, you do it, or oorah, you do it. Green Berets are like, maybe there's a better way to do it. Now, don't get me wrong. All those guys, they have their opinions, and but when you say this is how we're going to do it, they ruck up, and that's how we do it. But you need a lot of flexibility, and you just need to be able to operate in a very gray world, a very ambiguous world, because you're working in different cultures. My first JSET was in Uganda, and next thing I know, I'm trying to speak Swahili, and and there's 10 of us out there. And then we got put into Zaire during the Hutu-Tutsi crisis, and so now, I'm in Zaire trying to speak French to the Zawa, and then in Goma, Zaire, there's 2,500 people a day dying and no place to bury them. And how do you operate in that environment? And then I come back. I'm back home in 4 days. My first wife left me, and then I go to Haiti for 6 months, where we were going in to kill everybody, and then on the helicopter right there, they turned us around, and then they said, "Go work with them."
Been there, done that, Colonel. I was with you. Yep.
I had pictures in our target info packet of the guys we were going to kill. And then the next thing I know, I'm shaking hands with them, saying, "I look forward to working with you." You've got to be able to have that ability to adjust on the fly, and then that becomes all right. That's your new reality, and operating it. You can't get distracted. Whether it's like, oh, is it worth it? It's like, look, this is your mission. You do the mission as best you can. If the mission changes, then you change along with the mission. And not every, you don't have to try to make everybody an American. You don't have to bring democracy to the masses. You're there to do it. Good Lord. Operating in Afghanistan with Sharia law in place everywhere. When we were there in 2002, our job was to get rid of Al-Qaeda. We didn't care about Taliban. Everybody was a Taliban. We were there to get rid of Al-Qaeda. And so you weren't there to kill everybody and build a Walmart. You were there to get rid of foreign presence and Al-Qaeda. And at the time, it was leave the country to the Afghans. I have to say, as soon as I get rid of the other foreigners, and my foreign American leave. Then that mission obviously changed many times over time, but that's what we were there to do initially. I mean, unconventional warfare is fomenting a resistance where you're working by, with, or through them to either, remove an occupying power or get rid of a hostile government. So you're working with the locals. So you're de-emphasizing your presence and emphasizing them, and that takes an individual with a certain. You need to have a high IQ, quite frankly. You need to have a little bit of recklessness to you because we do a lot of dumb stuff. And you got to be able to work with others. As you said, you got to fit on team. A lot of guys that come into SF and it doesn't really work for them, they either leave SF or they go to some of the special mission units because it's not what they thought it was going to be. And they're more, they want to kick doors. Well, we kick doors too, but most of the time somebody else is kicking the door because we want them to be the face for the local population, not the Americans. So yeah, it's a unique character, and I've never been let down by a Green Beret over my life. Never, not even once, And I hope to be able to say that till I die.
Dave, I was going to ask this a little bit later in the episode, but it seems poignant right now. And again, I want our audience to listen to this answer because I think it's important when it comes to how amazing of a team the U.S. military is. It's the greatest team on the planet. And the resolve you guys have to have. You talked about basically being comfortable with the uncomfortable, being able to transition quickly. Without getting into any geopolitics right now, there's
Sure.
a lot going into Afghanistan right now, not going in, I should say. And I think the message that the country's missing right now is that for 20 years, we have had men and women in that country saving lives, securing, doing their job. And suddenly that has ended. And having spoken to veterans, there's a lot of people that might be feeling, what was that? What was the point of that? What did we do there? We'd be remiss if we didn't get your thoughts on that situation from the point of view of, a colonel.
Yeah. I have not been to Afghanistan since 2010, although I certainly keep up. Look, I've stated for a long time we should have left Afghanistan in 2003. We removed the Taliban, we removed Al Qaeda, we put a government in power, and we should have left. Maybe not 100%. Obviously, the CIA president should have been there, State Department should have been there, and we still should have had air power, whether out of Pakistan or Uzbekistan, to back up what State Department CIA was trying to do. But it should have been a very, very low level, low engagement, low visibility operation. But America has a long history of being terrible house guests that when we show up, we don't go home. I mean, we're still in Germany. We're still in Turkey from the first Gulf War. We're still in Japan. And so we stayed, and the mission changed a bunch of times. We took our eye off of it. We got distracted by Iraq, and then NATO took over, and it turned into a giant counter-narcotic operation, which was, in my opinion, a big mistake. And then we tried to get back to it, and then we've just kind of been muddling about. But 20 years is too long to be there. It's too long. When you're there that long, you're almost there to be there. And we should have brought all of them home in 2003, except for, like I stated before. But we did. I am not as upset about it as some of my veterans, fellow veterans, because I used to preach never fall in love with your G's, and your G's are your guerrillas, and that's your counterpart, and you can respect them. I mean, nothing like getting shot at together allows for bonding, but I never fell in love with any of them, and I constantly preach to my guys to do the same thing because they'd kill you just as soon as look at you. I mean, our relationship was built on them gaining power from us, whether that was money, uniforms, wasta in Arabic. The associating with us led to power. I mean, again, in 2002, it was all about different warlords. We were with the Pashto tribe out of Kalsta, Afghanistan, and down in Organy and down in Skin. So they were using us and we were using them, and it was fine, and the arrangement was fine. So I wasn't as angry about that, us leaving. And I wasn't as angry, frankly, about the Taliban filling the gap because, frankly, I expected it. Having said that, the NEO operation, which is a soft mission, and NEO is the non-combatant evacuation operation, is disgraceful. It wasn't planned. If it was planned for, then that plan was never executed. And the fact that we're witnessing what we are is embarrassing, is the biggest word. And I'm not even thinking of it as like, oh, our place on the world stage. I'm not as worried about that as a lot of people are scoring points on it for. But it's embarrassing that as capable as our military is, that this is what's going to be remembered about Afghanistan. It used to be Green Berets riding horses, or Green Berets running around in Toyota Hiluxes. That's what Afghanistan was. And now Afghanistan is a debacle that we created because we failed to execute a proper NEO operation. And you're seeing that results now. And what the fallout will be, I'm not real sure. But that's it. I guess I get angry, but it's from disappointment, frankly, more than anything else. That however this happened, I mean, good Lord, heads absolutely should roll, and it really needs to start at the very top. And I'm not in a position to do anything about it, so I'm now the veteran sitting at the bar stool, talking about the good old days and shaking my fist angrily at the TV. But again, I'm not like, oh, we got these poor Afghanistans, and yes, it's tragic. And the Taliban are terrible people, and their version of Sharia law is inhumane. And I have seen most of it,
100%.
But at the end of the day, it's this botched operation, and there's no way to describe it. It's just botched. We gave away Bagram Airfield in July. I mean, what they expected to happen. And then we pulled all the military out and left all the equipment, and then left all the non-combatants. It's 100% different order, and we know better than this, and yet it happened anyway. So I'm not sure what it was politics. I don't know if it was an arbitrary date that we put out that we will follow it, and so somebody did some terrible backwards planning. I just don't know. I'm not in a position to know anymore. But it's embarrassing, and because I'm embarrassed, that makes me angry.
No, Colonel, you're exactly right. Like you, I spent 12 months of my life there that I'll never get back. And we could have got a lieutenant who just graduated West Point to probably handle the evacuation effort plan better than it's executed now.
Yeah.
And I'm like you. I think that the U.S. What do we do? We say, we invade you, and then we say we're here to help.
Right.
so that's always difficult.
We feel guilty for invading, I guess.
Yeah,
I'm not really sure.
Right. And then I'm like you. I think combat operations should have been it, and then when it's done, we moved out. Look, I had to train the advanced combat training team of the Afghans, and I had to train commandos. It's not what I wanted to do, but while I was there, I gave it 100%. And I think what my point is, I gave people my word.
Right.
I gave people my word that I would look at like I mentored 5 Afghan Army sergeants major, right? 5 of them. And many of them had fought the Taliban before. So, they were experienced veterans. One had been shot like 5 times.
Right.
So like he's seen as much combat as I have, probably more. So I just think that, yeah, you're right. What we're seeing now, that's what people are going to remember. Colonel, I want to transition then. Thank you for that answer, by the way. And I think that's, you always downplay your intelligence and education, but it's extremely high, and your EQ is just as high. So that's what makes you such a great leader. And I want to transition to, you're a decorated combat military officer, you're Green Beret. You taught at your alma mater, West Point. You trained people across the globe and conflicts across the globe. But I would say from being a sergeant major in the Army, you're known as a soldier's soldier. And I think sometimes whether you're a coach or you're a business leader, there are some important qualities to understand about that. So can you just impart us on that meaning and some of those qualities that you brought to the table, both as an officer, but now as an entrepreneur, and a businessman, and everything else?
And I mean, thank you, JB. It's kind of you to say. Everybody. First of all, my family served all the way back, directly traced to the Revolutionary War. So we've always been in the military, and we've always been enlisted. So I broke the mold, and I broke the mold because we didn't have any college money. So my dad told me to find a job or find a scholarship, but actually said, get a job or get a scholarship, but after high school, you're going to get. So, and then we visited, I was going to go to VMI.
That's the best.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That is the best right there. Oh my God.
Yeah. And listen, I come from an incredibly tight family. I still talk to my mother every day today. I mean, my dad's God bless them. They're old, but my dad's still working. He still works at the Catholic Church. He's 82, so he's still kicking. But we visited West Point the summer before my senior year, and I saw the place, and so I applied, and fortunate enough to get in. JB and Leah, the best thing my parents ever did for me is that right before I turned 13, they put me working on my uncle's farm, and it was a dairy farm and a beef farm, so a lot of haying. And I worked at 6 days a week in the summer and every Saturday and during the academic year throughout high school. And it really taught me the value of hard work. Taught me that the hard work wasn't going to kill you. And it taught me the beginning of teamwork. I mean, I played peewee ball, I played football, but getting hay in a barn doesn't happen magically. You got to work together. And it reinforced to me that nobody really cares who your dad is, and nobody cares how much money your family has, or what your skin color is, or what your religion might be. They want to know if you can move that hay bale from point A to point B and do it 1,500 times a day, and do that 6 days a week, and do that throughout the summer. And if you can do that, then you're value added, which means you got to get just as dirty and sweaty as everybody else. And my dad told me, never be afraid to get your hands dirty. He goes, if your troops are working and you're not, then you're messing up. And that was reinforced to me by certain mentors at West Point. Frank Kiernan was one, Tex Turner was another, and then NCOs that I worked with in the Army. And the biggest compliment I ever was told was like, what? You're a West Pointer? I thought you were OCS. I mean, when they told me that, man, my feet weren't touching the ground. If you ever met my dad, then you know that where I get my like for talking to people and meeting people. My dad's never met anyone he didn't know and like on the spot. And so because of that, I always had the ability to connect with my brothers. Whether that was a sergeant major or on my B team, or whether that was a brand new private in the scout team. Sometimes, I got cautioned a few times early on that I was blurring the line and getting a little too close to troops, and that was good advice because at the end of the day there does have to be a separation. But I guess the fact that I generally enjoy people, and I've worked my whole life, and I come from blue collar stock. My dad retired as an electrical lineman, and I worked a farm growing up. That hard work's never bothered me. And I tell you, that also directly goes to, I work my rear end off as a business owner. It's 7 days a week. If somebody doesn't show up for work, the work still has to get done. And like I said, the dang ice machine didn't make any ice this morning. So I had to run to another store, load up 2 coolers, run back, drop those coolers off, run here. As soon as this is over, I'm running to get more coolers. And in the meantime, I hope a tech's on site fixing it. I pulled an all-nighter. My wife and I and my son, I have a 12-year-old boy. Best retirement present anybody could get. and he's named Jameson after the whiskey, and my wife thought of the name, which God bless her. He's a great kid, but we had a 1,200 sandwich, 1,200 smoothie order for the Greek Village on USC, University of South Carolina. We pulled an all-nighter the night prior in the stores with 8 other employees to make that order happen. My boy was there from 11 to 7, and he worked. And I'll tell you this, JB, my boy doesn't play sports, which used to bother the hell out of me because I played sports. And it took me a little while to recognize that he's got to do what he does, not me trying to make him do what I did. And he's a great kid, but he's learning all those things that I learned from playing sports by working in the stores. Because sports is nothing about meeting objectives. You run a play correct against the right defense, you're going to gain yards. You run a play in rugby, you run it correctly, you're going to score. Well, at Tropical Smoothie, an order comes in, everybody has to do their part to make sure the customer gets their correct order in a timely manner. And you've got all kind of different personalities that you got to meld together. And let me tell you, we got a revolving door when it comes to employees, man. If somebody works for me for 6 months, that's a great hire. Most of the time, they work for a few days and go, I'm not really liking this, and away they go. Because we're a job, we're not a career. I've got 80 employees. Average age is probably 19. Most of them, it's their very first job. And parents don't encourage their kids to work like they used to because it's all about enjoying your high school experience and having the maximum amount of time to get ready for college, even though I believe it's hurting the kids not having them in the workplace.
I thought working was part of the high school experience. At least it was.
100% correct. 100% correct. But it's at least, I mean, my very narrow experience window, you don't get the kids wanting to work as much as you used to. And I hope I'm wrong. I really do. But I don't think I am. Because we want to protect our children. We want them to have the best experience possible. And we sometimes err by thinking we're protecting them, and what we're doing is denying them the ability to learn through adversity in a relatively safe environment. I mean, you got to learn. I mean, my stores, good Lord, you got people that are interacting with each other that would never interact with otherwise. Never.
Right.
But yet they have to work together to make the mission.
You know, Dave, I'll tell you and JB a cool story here in a second, but here's the deal with our audience. I want you guys to know this, everybody listen. You know, we're going to have sports people on, we're going to have military people on, we're going to have anyone on that deals with teamwork. And what you're describing, Dave, is that when it's the military, whether it's the smoothie place, whether it's rugby, right? They're teams. And I think one of the mistakes that we make in athletics is we get into our silos with our sport, and that's the way it is. That's the world. And the truth is we can learn a hell of a lot from just observing other teams. And I'll put that into practice right now for you. One of the greatest team lessons I've ever learned, and I have brought this into every single locker room I've been part of since, all right? I lived in the United Kingdom for a few years, and I had the experience to be with a lot of military people in the Air Force. And one of the young men was an air combat controller. So for those of you listening, it's someone who sees stuff. They go into the field, I'll put it that way. And I asked him one time, he was opening up to me a little bit about the stuff he had done, which, I never dive into that unless the soldier wants to open up to me. And I asked him, I had this window and I asked him, I said, I have to know. I said, when you get out there and the bullets are flying, how do you do what you do? How do you do that? I don't understand. And he said this, and these two things hit me between the eyes and redefined selflessness, teamwork, and redefined everything for me in 15 seconds. And he said, Lee, there's two things you got to know. I'm sure you two could equate this. He goes, anyone who says they were in battle and wasn't scared wasn't in battle. He goes, I'm scared every time I go out there, right? In terms of, nervous, there's stuff going on. I ignore that. Then he said this. He said, it's real simple. He goes, when I go on the field, I assume I'm going to get killed, and I just try and save the guy next to me. And we all do that, right? And it really hit me, all right, to have that kind of mentality. And the reason I'm telling that story to you guys in the audience is this. When you're in a locker room, it doesn't matter the sport, and you hear that story, right? These guys are willing to die for each other, literally. We can't be willing to do that metaphorically in this locker room for our sport. That's the anchor for me. That's why the military is the greatest team on the planet, because of that and many other lessons. But I think about that story every single day. Any team I'm on, whether it's my work, whether it's sports, whether I'm teaching a team, I bring so many military lessons into that locker room because you guys are the greatest team on the planet. But I'll never forget that definition of it's not even about me. It's about the guy next to me, and we all do that together. That is a key to success. And as you said, Dave, early in the episode, you still might not get everybody out of there knowing that, right? So when it comes to sports and the audience listening here, understand that. These two gentlemen that I have the privilege of being here with today embodied that for years and years and years and still do to this day. And again, Dave, you've brought that to the Green Berets. You brought that to Tropical Smoothie. You brought that to rugby, right? So again, I'm sorry to go so deep, but that is the God to honest truth, is that the lessons we can learn for athletics, which no one, God willing, is going to die during, all right, from the military are obvious. When I want to learn something, I go to the best. The best is the military.
I just, before we get on to Dave here, I just want to caveat on that because I think it's so important. And Colonel, you know this, Lee, you know this, is that inside that team room, inside that locker room, there's no faking that. You can fake it. You can fake it to the fans.
Right.
You can fake it on social media. But Lee and I actually talked about this, Colonel, when I worked in the NHL and we were trading for a player. Who did I call? The equipment manager, right? Or I called a former teammate on that team. They're going to tell you exactly. The scouts can show you something, the GMs can say this, the coaches can say this, but inside that room that's the group that really knows you, and that's the group you don't want to disappoint.
Right.
And I think that's so important.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And I tell you, life inside the team room is truly the best place on the planet. Because, and I've seen arguments because people are, there are diverse views and there are diverse backgrounds. And then the ribbing, the teasing, the taking a piss out of each other goes on nonstop. But the best thing I like about the team room is the absolute utter certainty that it's the best team room on the planet. And that anybody outside the team room isn't any good, because if they were good, they'd be inside the team room. And I think every locker room should have that exact same mentality, that if you were worth a lick, you'd be with us, because this is the place to be. This is the team to be on. We train harder. We get all the best missions because we work. And if you were any good, you'd be here. Yeah, you recognize, you're good, but you're not that good. You're not good enough. You'd be with us. And I love that about Special Forces, because the guys you serve with on team, I could, when I go up to Fort Bragg for work, again with social media, I immediately have half my old team out for a couple of beers. And I say, hey, if you can make it out there, Charlie, Mike's, we're gonna have a beer, and they all come out. And it's not so much to see me; it's to recapture that team room for a brief moment. Because the worst thing about Special Forces is you love it. It defines your life forever. There's this quote out there that it's a mistress. You give everything you can to this mistress, and then she gets rid of you for a younger guy.
Right. You can say that about sports,
and
man.
You miss her for the rest of your life. You miss her. Now, and some people handle it better than others. You find other things to do. You stay in the defense community like I have, so you can, your role changes. Instead of, you're now part of the auxiliary instead of a guerrilla force or the underground. You're now in the auxiliary. But and then my wife decided, that we were going to open up a business, and I went into it very naive, and I really didn't have a lot to know what I was getting into, and it has been quite a ride, and that gives you purpose. And frankly, without purpose in life, there's no life. You got to have a purpose. And that's another thing that sports provides for us, or your work, or the military. It provides you purpose, because you have to have a purpose in your life, because otherwise, what's the damn point of it? And if you don't have a purpose now, then work to find that purpose.
Right.
And the thing is, you never know when it's going to hit you. So I'm not saying, but don't misconstrue that, if I don't really have a defined purpose, then what's the point of living? Nah, bullcrap. You just never know what that's going to be that you can really throw yourself into that helps define you while you're having an impact. You're getting just as much out of it as you're putting into it. Right. I'm very proud of the fact that we've opened 5 businesses. We're 3-1-1 on opening businesses. But I make payroll every 2 weeks. We make payroll. I've never missed a payroll.
I love that.
I still work shifts when I need to. I don't like working shifts, but you're not going to leave your team hanging. So you go. I'm relieving my wife at 2:00 today, so she can do something because she's working in shift today. If I could just get enough employees again, I won't have to work shifts. But that's a whole other challenge we're not going to get into. But
I was just say, Dave, one of the things I'll tell you now, and I love that you're bringing this stuff up about purpose, is for those of you listening, your purpose is probably to play your sport right now. And I'm going to tell you this, there's nothing wrong with that. If you have a dream, follow that damn dream. Okay. And embrace it. If you have the purpose of playing sports at a collegiate professional level, embrace every second. And I have to say this, everything that comes along with it. That means academics, being a good human being, and making sure that you're contributing. Okay. All of that is part of the purpose. But do not let anyone tell you that you cannot chase down your dream. Because I'll tell you this, everyone listening, it doesn't really matter if you get the dream at the end of the day. It's that you made the attempt to do it. And so many people, and the older you get, you'll see how much this happens, fall off from chasing down that dream. It is so important you never, ever give up on it. With that said, the other thing I want to bring on too, and you alluded to this, Dave, and I think it's so important to say this, because young athletes can hear this now. It won't apply to your older, but you can apply it in the locker room in the sense of knowing it. When you are done playing sport, and we are all done at some point. That is the truth. Okay. You can humble yourself by knowing you cannot play the sport forever. I know it might seem like you can, but you can't. What you will miss the most when you are done, it is not the trophies. It's not the accolades. It is not the MVPs. It will be the people that you share the locker room with. That is what you will miss the most. You just said that you're experiencing that in the military, right? Being a veteran, you experience that as a rugby player. I have a feeling if you ever retire from the smoothie business, that's going to be the same feeling as well, right? But the idea is this: if you're an athlete, chase your dream, understand what's important. It's the people around you, even if those people change, and do not ever stop embracing your purpose if you have one. And I will tell you this too, audience, you will have multiple purposes in your life, right? If you have kids in the future, which you're probably not thinking about, that will become your purpose very, very, very quickly, right? So Dave, look, we only have a couple minutes left, and I have to ask this question because it's part of the show. But our parent company, Pivotal Moments, and the Grit Channel, we're all about breaking that stigma behind mental health, mental fitness. So I want to know how you define the word mental fitness and how you practice mental fitness. Again, you've been alluding to it all episode, so this shouldn't be. But yeah, we got 2 minutes. I want to know.
Yeah, that's a great question in and of itself, because it's not something I've thought about a whole lot. I think that. That's a great. JB will tell you it's rare that I'm speechless, but this is a very important topic.
That's my job, Dave. This is what I do. I'm just kidding, Dave. Go ahead.
No. It's you're going to have a lot of adversity in life. I mean, hell, I failed Ranger School. Well, I got hurt in Ranger School the first time. And I went to my unit without a tab, and that was. I wanted to fight everybody because I thought that they were looking at me as less as a person because I didn't have a Ranger tab. Heck, I'm on my 3rd wife, man. I finally got a wife I like, and now I know why people stay married. But it's. I think that if you come from a strong family that you can rely on them, it's huge. And if you don't come from a strong family, then create one around you, which is your friends. All right. And I'm fortunate to have both. I'm I'm very much an extrovert, and I'm very gregarious, and I'm loud because I don't hear very well. But yet at the end of the day, I don't go telling people what's bothering me. But I tell my mother, and she's kind enough to listen. And I tell my wife, who sometimes is kind enough to listen. And other times she's like, look, you got to figure it out. We're too busy working. And I appreciate that as well, because sometimes you need somebody to tell you, look, buck up, man. We don't have time to feel sorry for yourself.
Right.
And I also think that goes into staying busy. And I'm not talking busy to be busy. And it gets back to purpose. But if you have things to do, nothing's worse than sitting around and thinking about what you were or what you could have been.
Right.
That's the worst. I mean, that's sitting in the kitchen with the lights out with a cup of Irish whiskey, man. The worst.
100%.
Terrible things happen from doing that. So don't do that. Find somebody you can talk to. And the military is the worst at that. Any of my buddies call me up, hey, Duffy, just checking on it. Hey, man, I'm good. I could be having the worst day ever. They're going to hear I'm good because I was their leader. And I'm never going to share with them that I'm having a bad day. And that's a problem. And that's my problem. I should be able to say, hey, man, I'm having a rough go of it right now. Or, Afghanistan has got me thinking about things. Or such and such just killed themselves. And, I should have seen that. And I didn't. And what did I do wrong? And I'm also I process my thoughts vocally out loud. And I do that a lot just to myself. Because it helps me put everything in perspective. But I think it gets back to that you have to have a trusted agent in your life. And it can be a relative, it could be a parent, it could be a sibling, it could be a friend. It's got to be somebody. Hell, it could be somebody professional. Call a hotline if you need to. But you have to have somebody where it allows you. Look, West Point sent me to get a degree in counseling. When I went into that program, I thought I was wasting my time. And I couldn't have been more wrong. And the beauty of counseling isn't that the counselor is going to tell you, going to say, oh, here's the answer to all your problems. The counselor listens and allows you to process and solve your own problems, or at least have a pathway to where you can start improving. You do that. The counselor just listens, maybe asks a couple of leading questions, but pays attention. A lot of us don't have people that pay attention to us. And that leads to isolation. That leads to sadness, and that leads to death. And so you got to break that. And, we always say, oh, surround yourself with good people, surround yourself with smart people. I've always had the luxury of having that. Not everybody does. And so if you're out there listening, if you don't have a trusted agent, and it's so easy to say find one or call somebody or ask somebody, it's not easy. But I just encourage you to have the courage to try. Because if it's going to go sideways, we know how that ends. And that sucks. Because at the end of the day, this is all we know is life. We don't know anything else. So you better maximize it as best you can. If you're out there playing sports, you're doing that. Well, life ain't nothing but a giant sport, man. It's competition. It's competition. You're trying to do better than your neighbor. And that's not buying a nicer vehicle. But you're in competition with them. You're in competition for jobs. You're in competition with status. You're in competition with everything.
Right.
And it's friendly. It can be a friendly competition. It's not cutthroat. I'm not saying that. But find that trusted agent. And that's what's really helped me. Listen, my mother has saved me plenty of times because I was in a bad spot. And she listens. And it's been wonderful. And I don't like to think about the fact she's 77, but her health, knock wood, still well. So but that's a long-winded answer for something I really haven't thought a lot about.
It's not easy to answer. Yeah.
No, Colonel, that's great. And I think just the caveat on that, when you're that trusted agent, don't be judgmental.
Yeah.
Don't be like, well, if JB, if you want to drink so many pops, you'd feel better. That, I think sometimes as a trusted agent, number one, you need to be a vault. You need to hold that in, when somebody tells you something of confidence. Number two, you can just be like, hey, I'm here for you. That's
Right.
it. And I know the same thing. Like I call Dan Alex, he's a West Point. He's a cadet, he worked for me. And there's times he calls me and he can tell I'm a little off. Hey, JB, you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. Well, let's just talk about it.
Right.
And I think that was excellent. Colonel, you're amazing. I love you. Yeah, like seriously, I call you when I need something.
Great.
You'd be the best, and I'll turn it back to
Well, and I'll tell you, JB, don't try to solve people's problems for them.
Exactly.
And I tell you what, that's been hard for me as a husband, because when my wife is talking to me about a bad day, it's like, well, hey, let's fix it. And that's the last thing she wants.
Right.
She just wants somebody to listen. And I'm not always good at it, but all you can do is try. And
you get better as you go. Yeah,
that's right.
No,
that's right.
and that word listen, Colonel, that word listen is an anagram for silent, right?
Right.
So
That's right.
And that's why, like, if you do go to a professional counselor, they're quiet. They listen.
Right.
They get all that.
And that's why the three of us are on a podcast. We're obviously all type A extrovert people, but this is the platform for us. So, Dave, look, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. We got about 30 seconds left. I want you to know that I appreciate you being vulnerable with that last answer. It's not an easy question to answer. It's a short question that almost always demands a long answer. But that is the mission that we're on. And I think you did a great job defining it. But that's going to do it for this episode of Win Championship Trades for Life, which is powered by Pivotal Moments. Once again, you can learn more about the organization and our channel Grit at pivotalmoments.org, and you'll find more inspirational, entertaining, educational content. Go check it out and subscribe. You will not regret it. For Dave Duffy and JB Spizzo, I'm Lee Elias. Thanks so much for joining us, and make sure to keep an eye out for more episodes wherever podcasts can be heard. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.